It's Dave, it's Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Squidcore duo. That's right, Squidcore duo, Squid Pisser. The band's new album, My Tadpole Legion, will be released on April 14th via 31G and Sweatband Records.
Sweatband.
Oh, I love this. Squid Pisser. This is amazing. Slamming down dolphin corpses at breakneck speeds. The duo, which is comprised of Tommy Meehan on guitar and Seth Carolina on drums, have constructed a fresh and mucousy new alien craft powered by tightly controlled noise guitar, savage primal drum work, and gooped up vocal deliveries that might sound like a gaggle of frogs thrown into a garbage disposal.
Yep.
Although the Squid Boys would not recommend doing this.
Don't ever do that.
No. Save the frogs. Conceptualized and formed in 2022, the band decided to fully utilize Planet Earth's viral slumber in order to gestate, write, and record 2 full-length albums worth of material. Throughout the year, Squid Pisser played a handful of shows in California and Nevada as a 2-piece, and they continued the quest for further personnel and collaborators. Tommy Meehan's tight, controlled noise onslaught of rainbow vomit, paired with the utterly brutal, breakneck, and savage drumming of Seth Carolina, merged to create a collection of tracks that have been forged in a totally fucked up and sonically chaotic storm of pus and goo. Their debut release, My Tadpole Legion, is a mutated smorgasbord of songs and guest vocalists from projects like Melt Banana, Necrogoblicon, Cancer Christ, Punch, The Locust, Wacko, and more. Also featured prominently is John Clardy of Terra Melos on drums for 3 of the songs. My Tadpole Legion was mixed by Kurt Ballou at Godset Studios and mastered by Alan Douches at West Side Music. Okay, so Squid Pisser. Yeah, so these guys were totally new to me, probably down to the fact they've only been on the go since 2022.
Yep.
But I heard the first single, which I think was Liquefied Remains, and I was interested, but I was also unsure of how I would cope with a full album.
Oh, right.
Because, from that one single, I was like, okay, this sounds kind of batshit crazy. This is like the audio equivalent of snorting hot sauce and then being pushed off a cliff. It's not for everyone, Duncan. It's not for everyone.
Being a connoisseur of mortuary reports, I can tell you right now, it's not anything that anyone's done before. I don't think anyone has died by snorting hot sauce and then jumping off a cliff.
Oh.
I'll wait to be proved wrong.
Okay. I will Google that later. Also in the press release, there was obviously this mention that there was guests pretty much on every track.
Yeah.
So I also was thinking, I'm not sure how is that going to come across. Like, I like a bit of consistency on albums, Duncan, you know what I mean? Especially vocally. So I was worried to an extent that this may come across a little bit maybe convoluted or a bit fragmented sounding. I wasn't too sure. So unsure before I went in. Apart from that one single, it piqued my interest, but I was like,
much baggage you've come to this album.
I know, I really am. It's too much baggage. Ooh, turns out the issues that I was expecting, I didn't really have an issue with. Firstly, down to the length. Obviously, we need to mention that this is between 18 and 19 minutes long. It's and although it's very jarring, very very chaotic, with multiple styles going on, from hardcore to punk to mathcore to noise rock, thrash, bit of grind. That kind of short runtime allows you to kind of take that 18-19 minute ear beating and not feel completely exhausted. I think the longest song is about 3.5 minutes roughly, with the other 8 tracks are all around kind of 2 minutes ish.
Yeah, the longest track is like 3.5 minutes long.
Yeah.
But when you strip out the noisy intro, it's really 1.5 minutes.
True,
right?
yeah,
So,
true. Yeah, the rest are a much shorter. So none of them really overstay their welcome. So to be honest, although I was kind of apprehensive, I never felt overwhelmed by this. The first track on the album was also the first single, and I think it's the only track without a guest. And it I suppose it kind of sets the tone of what to roughly expect stylistically to an extent. It's it's frantic, it's contorted, it's quite avant-garde, but there are moments where they kind of lean into a more kind of punk-driven sound, and they give you something to kind of grab onto. The rhythm goes a bit more kind of straight down the line, and the riffs dial back just a little bit. The vocals even have a little bit of a hook as well, and I think even from that first track, that was kind of the key of how to make this album work. Even though it's very disorientating at times, there are little hooks that they throw in, and they'll kind of replay throughout these songs to grab your attention. The second track, Violence Forever, which it features Megan O'Neill, she was in the band Punch. She also plays bass in King Woman. That second track is still chaos, but there are melodic moments in the guitar work. Reminded me a little bit of Sikth, where they start to kind of work up the fretboard, and that really stood out. Megan also has such a vicious tone on that track that you can't help but be blown away by the performance on that track. It's such an intense 2 minutes 10 seconds, and I suppose even I mentioned Sikth there, that Sikth vibe doesn't really it rears its head again later on in the album, but more from a kind of vocal perspective. There's a track called The Everlasting Bloat, which features Nicky from Necrogoblicon, and he has that kind of Mikey Goodman type vocal insanity. I think actually if I'd listened to that and hadn't read who the guest was, I maybe would have guessed that it was Mikey Goodman from Sikth. But I did like the fact that they gave you a slightly different personality vocally on every track, and they didn't go for a load of vocalists that all sounded the same either. So each track does give you a little bit something different in that respect, and I think that paid off, because it created these moments that on the album that kind of really stood out. The title track, Feeling Yakko of Melt Banana, was probably the perfect example of that. Her voice is quite eccentric, but that clean tone really works in amongst all the glitchy kind of mathcore type workings of the track. I think it's listening to an album like this, it happens so fast that it could be quite easy to overlook the playing on this album because there's so much going on. But if you sit back and kind of single parts of it out, like the guitar work or the drumming, you'll realize how fucking insane the playing actually is on this album. It may sound very disorganized and erratic, but this isn't an easy sound to produce. Some of the guitar work is especially complex, very, very quick shifts from section to section. I can imagine this would be a bit of a fucking nightmare to record as well because it's so intricate at places. I think my only kind of disappointment on the album was the kind of, I suppose, the tail end of the album, from track 7, I think was Vibe Monster. I felt like it did start to lose their way a little bit. The last kind of few tracks I felt were kind of lacking in a little bit of substance. There was more kind of glitch and bizarre noises than anything else. So it maybe was a step too far for my tastes, but I felt like the last part of the album was maybe lacking a little bit. Production is actually very, very listenable for an album of this style. Well, yeah,
you've done it again.
I've heard other albums that are in a similar vein to this that are, they go for a very abrasive approach. But I think Squid Pisser have got they've got a little bit of that, but I think they haven't done it at the detriment of the music. It's very explosive sounding, but I think everything is completely clear in the mix. I think all the instruments, have their own lanes. And nothing feels too jarring or distorted in the production. So yeah, I enjoyed this more than I was expecting. From that first track, I was unsure where it was going to go. I thought this could go like either way. I'm either going to like this or I'm just going to think this is far too much. But actually, pleasantly surprised. What about yourself? What do you think?
So I remember seeing these guys in a post of upcoming stuff, for the year. But I hadn't heard the track. So you'd heard the track and I hadn't. So I could tell from the visual gimmick that it was going to be something off the wall.
Yeah.
So I didn't know exactly. I knew when you told me the run length of the album before you passed it over, I was like that. I thought it was like that, so it's a grindcore album. Right? Okay. I can do it. I've done grindcore this year. I can do it again. I think you may have heard this little band called See You Next Tuesday. We reviewed their stuff earlier in the year. Bring It On, Daddy-O. And they're not really like that at all. Even a little bit. And I mean that as a kind of compliment to them. I think as extreme and off the wall as they are surprisingly commercial. And it's kind of twofold. One, the production, like you mentioned, is really clean, really radio friendly. The music isn't, but the production is really radio friendly. And then the second part is more than 50% of the tracks on here have hooky choruses. Like they know they can craft that in the same way that a kind of callous Dowboys can throw a curveball, a catchy chorus. These guys do it as well. Granted, it's not as saccharine as the Callous Dowboys by any stretch of the imagination, but it's singable and it fits. Musically, this is about as like Everything Against the Wall to see what sticks as it could be, but it's very well measured. The playing is great, and I mean this across every instrument. The playing is great, and I kept expecting the bit to happen where my interest would fall over. And it actually never happened. Like even on Vibe Monster to me feels like two tracks. Feels like the track which is the kind of instrumentally build up into what is the actual song, but because the actual song is like a minute and a half, they're like that. We can't have the instrumentally bit be longer, so we'll just make it one song. And as a result, it doesn't work. I will agree. I think the last three songs on this kind of feel like a lacking of focus. You come out of Vibe Monster, which is for the most part about 50% noise, 50% track, into Fuck Your Preacher, which is a 33-second, almost spoken word, kind of very Sikth-esque, sort of weird surrealist, like slam poetry session, into Lord of the Frog, which is a fine closer, but it's not a track where I was like that. Finality. I kind of just like finishes, and then you're like, what am I doing now? But everything before that, I think, is stellar. I think is really, really, really good. I love the switching up of the guest vocalists. I think it adds flavour and character in a way where, like, I didn't know it was a two-piece. I'd seen a photo of who I'm thinking is maybe the guitarist in his squid costume. But I just assumed there was a lot of them. And I was quite excited about that because I thought, well, that'll be fucking crazy to see live. I still think this would be crazy to see live because I don't know how they pull it off. But it's really, really, really well done. This is, once again, I sometimes feel like bands of this ilk go the one step further to lean into a crazy gimmick or lean into a crazy costume, because their music is so out there that I think they think people need something to ground them, and the grounding of them is the image. And I think sometimes that becomes a distraction. So you spend so much time talking about what the band looks like and not actually about the musicality on the album. And it's really fucking good. Their drummer is an absolute tank. Like total fucking savage beast. Guitar-wise, it's so much noise rock, but like fucking, he moves up and down the fretboard like lightning.
Yeah.
And all the other stuff that's crafted in here as well is mixed. The production is fucking phenomenal. The balance on everything, like there's no one point too far for me, and it holds together. And yeah, the big selling point for this is it's 19 minutes long. You can blitz through this one really, really, really fast, and then you'll go off listen to something else and come back to it with ease. I spun this a fair few times, and each time I listened to it, the more I kind of felt it was growing more and more on me. I think this is like I say, a surprisingly commercial extreme album. I use extreme once again in that it's music designed to be abrasive as opposed to designed to be heavy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's surprisingly commercial. Like really to the point that I was even after the second listen, I was just like, okay, yeah. I there's not a lot. It's like one of those, we could sit and talk about this and we almost are longer than the actual album runtime itself. I could talk about it for 35 minutes. I still don't think I could convey what listening to it feels like. But I will say this: I'll be very surprised if you go in with an open mind. When it finishes, you don't find yourself listening to it again. It has a Moorish quality about it. There isn't any one bit where I've listened to some grindcore stuff or some extreme noise stuff that I've got to the end of it, I've just been like, oh, right, we're not doing that for a while. Whereas Squid Pisser, I found myself listening to it, not straight back to back, but maybe about 10-15 minutes later, I was like, right, let's do second listen. Which I don't generally do in bands or albums like this. So yeah, I think there's a lot to celebrate here. How they do this live, they'll have to work that out. They're obviously doing it live. But I would love to see where they go next. And if we get more of just them with potential studio musicians that round out the band, or if this is always going to be an ongoing collaborative effort. I think either way would be a success story for them, if I'm honest. I think they could pull it off either way. I like the diversity of all the different vocals on here. Just to switch things up. I think it adds a lot of texture, but I know logistically that becomes a fucking nightmare to tour live. So, yeah, a lot to celebrate on Squid Pisser. Not nearly as gimmicky as I thought they were going to be.
Yeah, interesting. Obviously, they mentioned in the press release that they recorded 2 albums worth of material, but
40 minutes. 40 minutes worth of material.
I'm assuming this is the first of the 2, so maybe there's something else going to drop later.
You don't fucking drop a whole extra album recorded by Kurt Ballou in the bin. You know, you release that shit.
No, you do. Yeah, you can release that.
Release the Ballou cut.
Okay, so ratings for this one from Squid Pisser. I don't think this is an album everyone will get on board with. But that being said, I found this surprisingly easy to digest, more than I thought it would be, with more memorable moments than I was expecting for an album of this style. I think the musicianship is great. Production works really well with the personality of the album. Was every track a hit? No. I thought the end of the album did lack a little bit of consistency, but 19 minutes, not a massive issue. I'm going to go 3.5 on this one. Duncan, what are you thinking?
I'm coming in a 0.5 higher than you. I think there's so much to like on this for me, and not something I would usually lean into at all. So yeah, 4. I think this. I actually think I'm going to go slightly against Dave. I actually think there's more an audience for this than you think there is.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, I do. I think if you are solely brought in with the gimmick and go in with a relatively open mind, I think you'll come away with, even if you don't like the entire album, you will come away with a good handful of songs that you're like, those are fucking bitching. So,
okay. So that is Squid Pisser and their new album, My Tadpole Legion, out on April 14th. Links below to the band and the pre-order as well. Check it out. It's on Bandcamp as well. Let us know what you think. Have a little listen. Stick some comments in below. Happy to hear thoughts and opinions on it.
I'm sure you will have opinions. It's the internet. Internet has opinions, so
always.
Just one or two. We occasionally hear about them, Dave.
Occasionally. occasionally. Yeah, this one could be interesting, so let us know. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.